Life keeps breaking you until you stop forcing it. Every fracture, every collapse, every night spent staring at the ceiling, asking, when will it stop? That's life's whisper. Something is being shaped, not destroyed. But you've been trained to interpret every crack as a failure, every collapse as a sign you should have performed better, every broken part of you as evidence that you're not enough. You're not weak. You're being unmade to be remade. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the unseen self that must descend into ruin before the self can ascend. Life isn't trying to break you because it hates you. It's breaking open the story you've been living to reveal one with deeper truth. But that process doesn't feel gentle, especially when you're still gripping the controls. What breaks you is resistance, the suffocating insistence to control every narrative, to push doors that won't open, to force environments, relationships, identities that were never truly yours. When you force, life will break you. But if you stop forcing, life will begin to shape you. So ask this: what are you still forcing? Belief? Relationship? Plan? Identity? Because the more you push what isn't yours, the more you suffer the pushback. Syphoria isn't just exhaustion, it's the soul's revolt against living misaligned. It's your system protesting an internal script you inflated to fit a world that ignores the real you. You keep asking, why am I breaking? But the real question is, what am I forcing? You're not tired because life is hard. You're tired because you've been working for a life that never asked for your labor. You chase approval. You hustle for validation. You fight to remain visible, and all the while your authenticity crumbles. And life keeps breaking you until you stop forcing it. This is the crucible of belief. You believe that success requires struggle. You believe that endurance equates to worth. But real power, it doesn't come from brute force. It comes from alignment. It comes from having vision so clear, so rooted in essence, that you don't need drama to feel relevant. You embody it, and life responds. You don't control the river. You flow with it. And when the flow shifts, you shift. When the current moves, you surrender not because you're passive, but because you're smart enough to know that resistance kills more dreams than failure ever could. That is the transition from mindless action to disciplined presence. Purpose doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers in crises, in loss, in confusion. You think you're damaged. You think you're behind. But often you're being shaped by loss into clarity, by suffering into direction, by upheaval into purpose. Just stop forcing clarity. Feel the wounds. Listen to their intelligence. Discipline doesn't mean pushing harder. It means preserving integrity. It means setting the standard so high for how you treat yourself that you won't settle for anything less, even if it's convenient. It means you don't force an identity because you root one from your values. You don't hustle to stay relevant. You stand unmoving in who you are. Action born from alignment doesn't require justification. It moves with clean intention. You don't create in frenzy. You steward what's real. You don't prove, you become. And yes, life will still shatter things, but the broken feels different because you're not losing yourself, you're being refined. When life breaks you, it's not punishment, it's initiation. Every failure becomes initiation into wisdom. Every betrayal becomes initiation into sovereignty. Every collapse becomes initiation into a soul that refuses to take its power from external applause. Stop forcing life to conform to your plans. Instead, let life filter you. Allow it to remove the parts of you that don't belong. Watch your identity collapse under pressure. Not because it's flawed, but because it's imposter. Accept that sometimes the self you thought you were must die, so the real one can live. And once you stop forcing, you start listening to how your body responds, to which doors open easily, to where resistance meets surrender, to the people who stand unwavering when storms hit, to the truth that you used to drown out in performance. That listening gives rise to clarity. Clarity gives rise to vision. Vision gives rise to alignment. Alignment channels purpose. You stop performing for the spotlight. You perform less, but live more because you're directing gravity, not chasing images. Life breaks what resists. It flows around what aligns. So when you stop forcing alignment, you become it. You move from friction to flow. You move from exertion to expansion. You move from people-pleasing to presence. And in presence, the deepest transformation occurs not in the triumph, but in the stillness that precedes it. Let life break you less by ceasing to force what's misaligned. Start letting life break you more into what's true. Let the garbage parts fall away. Let the fossilized patterns dissolve. Let the imposed identity crumble and become light, light enough to move through cracks, transparent enough to reflect truth, anchored enough to not fear collapse. Because now, when life breaks you, it doesn't feel like the apocalypse, it feels like a return. Return to breath before busyness. Return to soul before script. Return to self before survival roles. That's the power of release. That's the intelligence of letting life shape you rather than controlling it. That's when life stops breaking you and starts making you. So stand here now. Let the breaking soften you, not harden you. Let the collapse humble you, not fragment you. Let the pain initiate you into clarity, sovereignty, purpose. Life breaks you until you stop forcing it. But when you do, life will break open for you. And when life finally breaks open for you, it doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly, subtly, like the moment you realize your breath is deeper without effort, like the moment your smile isn't rehearsed, but reflexive, like the first time in years you say no, without guilt, or yes, without fear. Because the opening doesn't happen outside of you, it happens within. You stop chasing energy that doesn't feel reciprocal. You stop decoding mixed signals from people who never learned how to hold clarity. You stop giving your precious time to what only drains and never builds. This is the reclamation of your rhythm, the deep unlearning of the addiction to force. And now you begin to remember. Real life, real flow, real connection doesn't have to be begged for. What's real rises. What's real responds. What's real recognizes you without demand. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's what the breaking has been about, waking up. Waking up from the spell of inherited stories. Waking up from the trance of false urgency. Waking up from the myth that love must hurt, that success must bleed, that purpose must prove itself. You've been living on someone else's script, but your soul was never meant to be a character. It was meant to be the author. And now you're writing again, not a story of control, a story of creation, no longer forcing plot lines to fit outdated archetypes, no longer reducing your experience to fit into a box made by people afraid of your fullness. You expand, you erupt, you emerge, and in that emergence, you terrify the old systems. Because you cannot be sold when you're whole, you cannot be puppeteered when you're present. You cannot be gaslit when you've built your reality on direct experience, not borrowed beliefs. You will lose people. You will grieve identities. You will shatter illusions. But you will gain sight. Sight that burns away every facade. Sight that pierces through performance. Sight that finally shows you the one thing force always tried to distract you from, that you are not meant to control your life. You are meant to collaborate with it, to flow with it, to let it guide you, not to ease, but to essence. So now you walk different, not hurried, not hesitant, but honest. You walk in alignment, not needing permission, not asking for acceptance, not looking for applause, just walking clean, clear, and awake, because life has stopped breaking you. And now, life is blessing you, because you finally stopped forcing it. Blessing you not with more noise, more status, or more validation from hollow spaces. But with truth, the kind of truth that doesn't ask for attention because it already commands gravity, the kind that doesn't seek proof because it exists beyond justification, the kind of truth that sits silently in your gut and knows. You walk into rooms and no longer wonder if you belong, you decide. You speak and no longer dilute yourself to be liked, you resonate. You listen and no longer absorb everyone's chaos, you discern. Because you have become the calm you once begged the world to give you, the peace you prayed for in chaos, the clarity you hoped someone else could hand you. You became it by shedding what was never yours, by watching the life you once forced fall apart only to find beneath the rubble your real one. This is the alchemy of surrender. This is the fire that doesn't destroy, it purifies. You didn't lose yourself when things broke. You found yourself when you stopped forcing what was never meant to last. You stopped making homes in places that kept you homeless within. You stopped mistaking temporary roles for eternal truths. You stopped confusing achievement with alignment. And now you move like someone who no longer negotiates with their soul. You don't argue with your boundaries, you embody them. You don't perform empathy, you extend it from a place of fullness, not depletion. You don't chase energy, you magnetize it. Because what's meant for you doesn't pull you out of your peace, it meets you inside of it. And what isn't meant for you, it dissolves not because you banish it, but because it cannot survive in the atmosphere of your clarity. This is what happens when you stop forcing life. You let go of artificial momentum. You exit the circus of comparison. You step away from the hamster wheel of endless proving, and you begin to create from truth, from stillness, from self-possession so deep it humbles the chaos around you. This is the discipline of alignment. It's not soft, it's sacred. And when you live from it, you don't just stop forcing life, you start becoming life itself. You become life itself, not in fragments, not in roles, but as the totality of everything you once chased: wholeness, peace, depth, freedom now pouring from within you like a quiet revolution. You no longer wait for signs. You are the sign. You no longer beg the world to open its arms. You become the place where openness lives. Because now you're not forcing your way through locked doors. You're building doors that only truth can walk through. This is the transformation that force could never give you. Because force is frantic. Force is blind. Force is desperate to avoid death, but doesn't realize it's killing you in the process. But you let it be. The ego that needed control. The persona that needed applause. The version of you that kept showing up exhausted and calling it strength. You buried it not in grief, but in gratitude. Because that version taught you what truth is not. And now, everything you do is precise. Every move you make is quiet and potent. Your no is clean. Your yes is sacred. Your silence is intentional. And when the world asks you to force again, to speed up, to fit in, to contort, you don't rebel. You refuse. You let it pass like weather. You let the pressure speak and then dissolve. Because you're not addicted to reaction anymore. You're married to response. You don't need to be everywhere, doing everything. You only need to be in alignment. And alignment makes you magnetic not because you're loud, but because your energy is unmistakable. People feel it in your presence. The calm, the edge, the quiet knowing that you cannot be moved by anything shallow. You cannot be sold a cheap version of peace. You cannot be shaken by someone else's storm because you've already met your own and you didn't run. You stayed. You watched it burn. You stopped forcing the fire to leave and let it teach you instead. And when the ashes cleared, you rose. Not just healed, but whole. And whole people don't force anything. They attract everything that's real. They walk differently. They live differently. And they remind everyone they meet. Life never had to be forced. It only needed to be felt. Felt, not analyzed, not optimized, not tamed. Used felt, raw, unfiltered. in all its mess and mystery and magnificence. Because the truth is, life was never a puzzle to be solved. It was a presence to be entered. And now that you've stopped forcing your way through it, you feel again. You feel the weight of your own silence and realize it's not emptiness, it's depth. You feel the discomfort in spaces you used to tolerate and understand it's not resistance, it's rejection from the soul. You feel your anger not as a flaw, but as a fire revealing where you've been crossing your own boundaries to make others comfortable. You feel grief, not as an enemy, but as a sacred initiator into more honest living. And because you feel you no longer numb, you no longer distract, you no longer build fake lives to hide real wounds. You face them. And in doing so, you reclaim the parts of yourself you buried under performance. The child who was curious before shame, the artist who created before judgment, the soul who was wild before obedience. You remember that there was never anything wrong with you, just layers of force that hardened over time. But those layers are gone now, stripped, burned, released. And what's left is truth, not loud, not glamorous, but grounded, unapologetic, unshakable. You don't need to announce it. You live it. And that living becomes a signal, a frequency that ripples outward and wakes others up, not because you're trying to save them, but because you finally saved yourself. You've exited the war with life. You've disarmed the parts of you that kept swinging for survival. And now, you don't force the next season. You receive it with open palms, with quiet strength, with a heart that no longer rushes toward the future, but trusts that what's meant is already on its way. No more forcing, no more faking, only flow, only truth, only you, undeniably you, alive, aligned, and finally, free, free without escape, grounded without resistance, still without stagnation. You are no longer a storm trapped in skin. You are the eye of it, centered, watchful, whole. You used to think peace was something you'd earn when everything outside calmed down. But now you know it begins when you stop wrestling with the current of your own life, when you stop trying to outthink the unknown, when you stop bargaining with fate for a smoother path, and instead you walk it, as it island, crooked, sacred, terrifying, beautiful. Because this path isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need life to look a certain way in order to feel certain in themselves. That's the true reward of surrender. Not comfort, but clarity. Not ease, but essence. You no longer seek safety in what's predictable. You find power in what's authentic. And suddenly the things you used to chase begin to chase you. Not because you mastered a tactic, but because you mastered yourself. You don't force love, it finds you resting in your truth. You don't force purpose, it rises when you move with alignment. You don't force healing, it flows when you stop picking the wound. This is the final shedding, the final death of the old story. The story that told you life only rewards those who fight for every inch. The story that told you ease was laziness and suffering was noble. The story that told you your power lives in how much you can control. You let it go. And in its place, a new way of being. Silent, unforced, unmistakably real. You speak less, but every word lands like lightning. You move less, but every step echoes like thunder. You're not trying to get somewhere. You are the destination now. You are the ground you used to seek. You are the peace you used to chase. You are the stillness life kept trying to return you to every time it broke what you kept trying to force. And now that you finally stopped, now that you finally let it be, life begins. And when life begins, truly begins, it doesn't explode with noise or spectacle. It unfolds softly, precisely, without apology. It meets you in the spaces you used to rush past, in the slow morning breath, in the unspoken understanding between you and someone who sees you now, in the quiet moments of choice, when you no longer default to fear. This is where your power lives now. Not in dominance, not in performance, but in discernment. The discipline to choose what feels aligned over what looks impressive. The courage to sit in the unknown without demanding immediate answers. The wisdom to see that timing is not something you manipulate, it's something you meet. And you meet it as the version of yourself that no longer needs to grasp, because you are no longer proving, you are living. You are no longer performing, you are embodying. You are no longer forcing because you have become what life was trying to shape you into all along. You look around and the landscape hasn't changed much, but you have. You don't crave chaos anymore, it feels foreign. You don't tolerate misalignment, it feels like poison. You don't cling to what doesn't flow, it feels like regression. And you don't confuse love with attachment, purpose with pressure, or power with control. Because you've lived the version of you that did, and it broke you. But the breaking wasn't punishment, it was prophecy. It was the soul demanding its throne back. And now that it sits in its rightful place, you wear peace like armor and stillness like fire. Not everyone will understand you, but they will feel you. They will feel the resonance of someone who no longer leaks energy chasing what isn't theirs. Someone who no longer fragments themselves to be accepted. Someone who no longer fears letting go, because they know what's real returns and what's not was never meant to stay. So you don't flinch anymore. You flow. You don't demand. You discern. You don't chase life. You invite it, and in return, life stops testing you and starts trusting you. With peace, with purpose, with people who don't drain, but build, with moments that don't just impress, but transform. And when they ask, what changed? You'll smile, because you'll know, you'll remember. Life keeps breaking you until you stop forcing it. And the moment you did, life began flowing through you. Flowing through you not just in moments of joy, but in moments of depth. Not just in clarity, but in confusion. Not just in love, but in solitude. Because now you know the flow doesn't disappear when life gets hard. It's revealed when you stay open, even as everything around you contracts. When you trust, even when nothing outside you gives a reason to. When you hold the silence without filling it. That's the final lesson. You never had to make it happen. You only had to make room for the real, for the raw, for the rhythm of life that doesn't ask you to dominate it, but to dance with it, to become an artist of alignment, a steward of energy, a vessel for clarity. And that clarity, it will offend the old you. It will scare the parts of you that once felt safe in chaos. It will terrify the people who fed on your people-pleasing. But you won't shrink. Not now. Not after this much death and rebirth. Not after this much clarity carved from collapse. Because now you've seen it. The old way cost too much. And the new way, it doesn't cost it. Restores. It brings you back to you. It heals not by adding more, but by removing everything that was never true. And in that stripped sacred space, life speaks. Not in words, but in resonance. Not in signs, but in sense. You feel what's real. You follow what's light. You release what no longer echoes. And in doing so, you become untouchable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can own you. You're not owned by approval. Not owned by outcomes. Not owned by pressure, image, or ego. You're rooted in self, in spirit, in something deeper than logic, louder than doubt. You've stopped forcing. You've stopped chasing. You've stopped pretending. And in that holy pause, you've become everything you were always meant to be. So breathe, feel it, anchor it, and never forget, life didn't break you to hurt you. It broke you to free you. And now that you're free, everything flows. And so you walk not ahead of life, not behind it, but with it, step by step, moment by moment, not pushing, not pulling, just being, in rhythm with something ancient, eternal, and unmistakably you. The war is over. The need to force, gone. The false self, dissolved. Now there's only space, wide, wild, uncharted. And in that space, you don't fill the void out of panic. You honor it as potential. Because now you know, nothingness isn't absence. It's a sacred pause, a breath before creation, a silence before song. You no longer fear that space. You become it. You hold it, because you're no longer scared of who you are without the striving. You're no longer terrified of what's left when the masks are gone. What's left is peace, power, presence, and purpose so grounded, it no longer needs to announce itself. It simply moves through your words, your choices, your energy. You don't need to impress anymore. You don't need to explain. You don't need to earn what you already are. You've remembered. You've returned. You've risen, not as someone new, but as the version of you that always existed beneath the force. The version that doesn't live in the future, doesn't ache for the past, only stands in the center of the now, breathing, clear, free, alive. This is your real life, no longer forced, only flowed. So let it come, let it break, let it bless, let it build, let it be. And as you do, watch everything you thought you had to chase come home to you.